The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jacob Kaza. I'm a senior planner with the City of Westminster's Community Development Department in the Planning Division. I'd like to welcome you all to the project meeting for the Huron Farm subdivision rezoning, preliminary development plan, and official development plan. And I'd like to introduce John Spencer, who is the development team lead on the project. John will be giving his presentation, and then the city staff, I will be giving a presentation on behalf of city staff, and then we'll have some time for some questions. I'd like to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, and we are live on YouTube right now. And after the meeting is recorded on YouTube, it will be posted there on the city's YouTube page, so you can all go back and look at it if you missed something. or if one of your neighbors is interested and they were not able to attend, they can also go watch it as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here and having this opportunity to meet with you to discuss this project. My name is John Spencer. I'm with Sterling Design Associates in Littleton. And I'm here on behalf of the owners, Jared and Jan Melius, of this property. Jacob, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. One more. So just a quick introduction. The lot is currently a 2.6 acre lot. It is zoned O1 or open space. It was formerly part of Adams County, and it was annexed some years ago, but maintained that zoning. In order for the owners to build a second house, they need to subdivide the property and rezone it to an R1 residential. So we are in the process right now, and that's why we're having this meeting, is to speak with you about the rezone and kind of the general plan for this. You can move on to the next slide, please. So that's not the one I was looking for.
John, I'll go ahead and talk about this one. Okay. Really quick for everybody who's watching, we do allow questions and comments to come in, and right now you can see it on the right side of your screen. If you're on a computer, there'll be this little bar that's up on the screen, and that's how you ask questions or type in any comments. At the question and comment portion of the meeting, we will go ahead and read those out aloud. If it's a comment, we'll just read it. And if it's a question, we will read it aloud and then try to answer it as best as possible. So that's how we'll do it. And we'll be doing questions and comments later in the meeting.
Thanks, Jacob. So moving on, again, you know, we're looking at the owners want to build another house on the property. It is of sufficient size per the zoning and the comp plan for a single family residential property to be subdivided. So we are looking at splitting the lot, and you know, the Meliuses have a large family. They do some fostering as well, and so that's the reason for wanting to build a house there. The rezone, again, the property is per the comp plan designated as an R1 residential zone district. And so that's what we are proposing. We are not proposing any other uses other than what's typical within the R1 zone district. You can move on to the next one, please. And just to give you guys a little bit of you know, perspective for the property, our project is along 148th there, just west of Huron. It is sandwiched in between Adams County zoning to the north, which is A1 agriculture, and Adams County zoning to the south, which is also A1 agriculture. If you go on, you can kind of see the pink area is all the city of Westminster. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the GIS zoning from the city of Westminster. The O1 green lot is the lot in question. There's the Quail Hill PUD to the west, there's PUD to the south, and a PUD across Huron to the east. And again, the properties directly flanking it to the north and south are Adams County. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the survey of the property. If you look on the right side, there's a typical, the residential property there, there's a barn, and then there's a large area in the back, which, you know, historically has been agriculture use. Next slide, please. This represents what we are proposing. You can see the lot line, which is about 2/3 to the west of the property, or along the property, where we have the proposed lot line. This would create what we're calling lot 2 for the new residence on the west side there. It's roughly 0.86 acres, and the remaining 1.56 or so would be lot 1 for the existing residence and accessory structures and the like. You also see on here how we have some setbacks and a basic footprint of what we are proposing. We are meeting all the required setbacks and the open space requirements, as well as access criteria to 148, which serves as the main access to the Quail Hill neighborhood. We will be doing landscaping along 148th is required, some additional landscaping along Huron as well as part of the subdivision requirements. There was a question that came up about the wall. There is a portion of the wall on the west side that sort of starts around the corner going along 148. That wall will need to be reduced and or removed from the front setback all the way to where it will meet the proposed property line for lot 1 on the eastern edge of lot 2. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it would be right along this area if you can see that. And you'll see a little note on there that says remove existing wall to the west. And then the remainder of the wall will be completed where the columns have been already installed, and it would be that same stone veneer wall that you guys are familiar with there on the west side. Next slide, please. These are building elevations as we have currently in the works. It's a very handsome residence. This is the front at the top and the rear elevation at the back. It'll be a ranch style. Next slide, please. The property falls away a little bit. And so these elevations for the would be the east and west are somewhat not representative of the grades, but the property does fall in elevation from the north to the south. So there'll be a slight grade change there, but again, we aren't proposing a walkout basement or anything. Again, just a more ranch style house. Next slide, please. This is a picture of one of the iterations of this same residence. You can see the materials. There's quite a mix of different materials, masonry, stone, stucco. There's some wood accents and a little bit of metal accents with a shingle roof. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a view of that same residence that was constructed. Again, this one has a walkout basement. We are not proposing a walkout basement, but again, felt that these pictures would give you guys a good sense of kind of what we're looking at. Again, materials have not been finalized, but this is the general look and feel of the house that is currently being contemplated. I think that's mostly it. You can, next slide, please. I think we're basically into questions, and we can kind of hit some of those questions that that Jacob had shown on there.
John, I'm going to go ahead and do our staff presentation right now as well. So again, to introduce myself, my name is Jacob Kaza. I'm one of the senior planners in the planning division. This is a project that I'm currently leading the city staff on the review for it. And I'll go briefly over our development review process and what the city reviews it against. And then we can again go over some of the questions and comments that we will get from the audience. So really quickly, so there are 3 different applications that this development has to apply for. So first is a rezoning. That rezoning application is required in order for them to subdivide their lot. Their current comprehensive plan designation is R1 residential, and the uses that they're proposing are consistent with that comprehensive plan designation. O1, which is the existing zoning, it's very common that when we see property first annexed into the city, but there's not an actual development plan for it, or there's no additional identified uses. O1 is the most common zoning that would be assigned or get assigned to a property at that time of annexation. And so that's what happened with this property. It got assigned O1 zoning. This property is over 2 acres in size, and our city code, the Westminster Municipal Code, requires that any property that is over 2 acres in size, if they are going to rezone, they must rezone to planned unit development. And planned unit development is essentially a form of contract zoning. It's consistent with the neighborhood Quail Hill and the orchard at Westminster. And essentially, they will develop 2 separate documents: a preliminary development plan, which is the second application, and a third document called the official development plan. And those 2 zoning entitlement documents are what the city staff will review, and that's what will ultimately get considered for what the development will be. So they have applied for all 3 of the applications at the same time, which is very typical for a property of this size and for the uses they're asking for. Both of those have gone through, or all 3 of those applications have gone through the first staff review, and now we are currently at the stage of the neighborhood meeting or project meeting. After this meeting, they will address any comments or questions that have come up and incorporate those into their plan. They'll resubmit them, and then the city staff will continue to review it for compliance with city code and the city comprehensive plan. And then ultimately, the city staff cannot approve a rezoning on their own. This will need to go to the city council. So the rezoning and the preliminary development plan will need to be reviewed and considered by the Planning Commission and by the City Council. So this will, again, need to go back to City Council, and City Council will be the ultimate decision maker in this application. So that will be a ways off. I would expect that to not happen for several months. I think we are still several months away from that, so I don't think that it would be happening anytime soon. There are public notification requirements for all of the public hearings. So there will be mailings out to adjacent property owners. There will be signs posted on the property to let you know of the time and location of those public hearings. And there will also be a notice placed in the newspaper, as well as information on the city website. For consideration of rezoning and preliminary development plans, the city code lists out several different standards that the city shall consider when looking to approve a rezoning or preliminary development plan. Some of those, as I've mentioned, are the conformance with the comprehensive plan, application of sound planning principles, any exceptions from code requirements. We identify those on the comprehensive or on the preliminary development plan and the official development plan. We look at compatibility with existing surrounding development, the design of the transportation infrastructure, so particularly here the driveway, and then if there are standards in there for the ODP. For the ODP, and to kind of differentiate between what a PDP or a preliminary development plan and an ODP, official development plan, are, a PDP is essentially a bubble diagram where you would typically just say this. If you looked at 100 acres of land, you'd say this 50 acres is residential and this 50 acres is commercial. Whereas in an ODP, that's where we start to get very specific with every single detail, generally down to the inch. So that's where we're really looking at, where are the fences, how tall are they, what type of landscaping is there, where are the access locations, what type of improvements need to be built. So specifically, some items we'll look at are parking, stormwater drainage, pedestrian connections, traffic, and how much would be generated from that, the compatibility of the design, the conformance with the comp plan, and then also does it match the preliminary development plan. That's the end of the staff presentation, so I believe we can go ahead and go into questions and comments. John, would you like to go ahead and start?
Yes, thanks, Jacob. The first question is from Muriel Dunning. The question is the proposal to make this part of the Quail Hill subdivision and requirements?
John, would you like to answer that?
Sure, I can answer that. So again, if I understand the question, is it intended that this would become part of the Quail Hill Homeowners Association? And it is not the intent at this time to become part of that. It is independent.
All right, the next is a comment from Charlene Baker. I'm opposed to the driveway cutting through the current entrance and disturbing 30 years of care and growth. The driveway is in a blind spot on 148th. Ms. Baker continues into the next column with the only ones benefiting are the owners. Make the driveway on the property that is being developed. The next is a question or a statement from Brina Martinez. They're very concerned about the entry for the new location. This curve in and out of the neighborhood is very dangerous. This would only increase the danger. Next is a question from Charlene Baker, who owns the property called Huron Farm. I think I missed the name.
I'll go ahead and answer that. Huron Farm is what we are calling the subdivision. It is not, that's just the name we're giving it. So it is owned by the Meliuses, who currently own the property on the corner of Huron and 148. And they are the ones that are proposing this subdivision.
All right, thank you, John. The next is a statement from Muriel Dunning. It will appear to all people that this is part of the subdivision due to the historical placement for the subdivision sign. Does the applicant have a comment or a response on that?
Thank you, Ms. Dunning. I understand the concern there because the Quail Hill monument sign is out there, and this is kind of acting as the main entry to the neighborhood. It is public right-of-way, however, and so we don't, while we understand the concern, I guess we don't feel that it would cause any confusion. This house is mostly going to be used by the same owners that own the existing residence on the corner. And this is really our only option for an access to that rear lot is along that frontage of 148. So we're not proposing, one of our exceptions in our subdivision application is we are requesting an exception from a typical subdivision to provide a monument sign. So there will be no signage out there that states this is Huron Farm, and that's mainly because this is really only a two-house subdivision, but secondly, because that would add to confusion for folks that are coming in, having two different signs in that location just doesn't seem to make sense. So that is one of the exceptions that we've submitted and requested for consideration by the city.
All right, thank you, John. Next question is, how would the new building connect to the sanitary sewer?
That's a very good question. So I appreciate that. The closest sanitary sewer is within the Quail Hill subdivision to the west. It is over 480 feet away. And so based on typical standards in the code, this property would not be required to connect to it because of the hardship of connecting in no proximal utilities. And so we are proposing to have a septic system on the property that would be located to the east of the house, of the proposed residence, kind of in between the existing and the proposed. So it would be on the east property line. It wouldn't be proximal to any of the other properties in the vicinity.
Thank you, John. Next is from Muriel Dunning. She asks, used for what purpose? And John, I think this is a question in response to a statement you made a couple of questions ago regarding the use of the house being generally being used by the owner of the existing house. So I think maybe there's some clarity that's needed there.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that the best I can. Again, the Melises have a pretty large family, and they do a lot of fostering of children as well. And so they are looking for an opportunity to be able to expand. Again, these would be two separate properties. Exactly, who would be living in which house, I don't know currently, but it would all be within the same family ownership. We are still proposing, to have fencing and distinct separation should in the future the property be sold, one of the properties be sold. That's about all I can give you at the moment.
Thank you. The next is from Jonathan Nixon. My concern is that the properties directly to the south, 2.5 to 5 acre properties, will jump on the bandwagon and also try to get rezoned. But instead of building a home, sell it to a developer who wants to put up apartments similar to the massive apartments that were recently built at the Orchard Town Center. Is the zoning for the Orchard apartments on the other side of Huron also an R1 zone?
I can go ahead and answer that, John. So across the street at the Orchard Town Center, that's zoned planned unit development, but the comprehensive plan designation is split between mixed use center and residential R36. So that that property in particular, where the newest apartments, the Curate apartments, just were built, they went to City Council and got a comprehensive plan amendment approved to remove the mixed use and change it to just the R36 on that property. And so that was what helps facilitate the entitlement for that, those set of apartments. On the west side of Huron, with the adjacent properties to the south of here that are still in Adams County, on the city's sphere of influence on the existing comprehensive plan, we currently show those as residential R1, which is the same designation as Quail Hill and this Huron Farm property. So if the city were to entertain annexing those into the city, which they would likely need to do to build anything substantial on those properties, they would then have to get City Council to also approve any sort of increase beyond that. So City Council would have to approve their annexation into the city, and then would have to also approve the zoning and entitlements for anything there. So that would be the process if somebody on those properties wanted to do what you're suggesting.
All right, thank you, Jacob.
If I may, I just wanted to add in there, I believe when this property was annexed, the other ones to the south were also included in that proposal, and they were opposed to being annexed into the city. Why, I don't know, but my feeling is they liked their situation as they had it with the agricultural zoning. But as Jacob said, they would have to go through a significant process in order to increase density in the future.
All right, thank you, John. Next question is from Charlene Baker. Why can't access be from Huron? You said it was not possible, but why?
Well, we can look at our options there. It would be I guess we haven't technically looked at all the specifics on that, but we'd be creating a flag lot situation that could create some other technical challenges. And from day one, we had not considered that. So I guess that's still an option, but we would need to dig deeper into that and review code requirements and access requirements for that property.
All right, thank you. Next is a question from Charlene Baker. Will this have to be approved by the city council?
So I can go ahead and answer that, John. So yes, at a minimum, the two applications that would need to be considered by city council are the rezoning and the preliminary development plan. On that preliminary development plan, we typically show an access location, and so it would generally be under the city council's purview to consider that.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Next question is from Steve Platt. Why can't the owners use their own property for the driveway rather than creating a dangerous driveway right in the bend on the Quail Hill entrance?
I'll take that. Again, thank you, Mr. Platt. I think we kind of addressed that previously, but that's something we will take into consideration. I did want to note, as part of our initial review with staff, traffic came back and commented on ensuring that we would have sufficient site visibility triangles on that intersection or on that bend. As part of that, we would likely need to remove the 2 spruce trees that are there in the right-of-way that create the visibility challenge. We will be required to augment that landscaping out there, so there's significant more landscaping that's being required of us to develop this property all along that entire frontage of 148. But again, those safety concerns are part of our process that we go through with staff in the city to make sure that no unsafe situations are created.
All right, thank you, John. Next question is from Charlene Baker. If this is for an extended family, why not just ask for an exception and build 2 houses on the 2.5 acre lot with access to Huron?
I believe by code we cannot do that because of the size of the property. We can't have 2 houses on a single property.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that for John. The city code doesn't allow for more than 1 single family home on a single family lot. Ultimately, the process of asking for an exception to that would be generally the same thing. They'd still have to go rezone the property to PUD, create a PDP, create an ODP. They'd still have to go to city council. And the only difference would be whether it's 2 lots or 1 lot, which has some, other than just city code, it has some considerations financially. So.
All right, thank you. The next question is from Muriel Dunning. Are the trees in question on private property or the association's property?
Let me take a look at that. I believe they are in public right-of-way, so it is not, while it currently is maintained, I believe, by the association, they are technically public property trees.
Yeah, correct. So the space in between the north boundary of this property, the Huron Farm property, and the 108th curb and gutter is all within the public right-of-way. So there are no private tracts or HOA-owned tracts there of land. Essentially, all of that space with the 148th entry drive is all public right-of-way.
All right. The next question is from Charlene Baker. Quail Hill paid for those trees. Will we be reimbursed for our losses?
That's a good question. I do not believe so. But as I mentioned, you know, there's going to be significant more landscaping required as part of this subdivision development than is currently out there right now, including trees. There's, you know, we'd be removing 2, and I think we're required to plant another 9 or so trees out there.
All right, thank you. Great. Are there any other questions from the attendees?
I think if it's possible, while we're waiting to see if there's any others, I just wanted to note we did receive an email with some questions from Mr. Randy Wiley. I think most of the questions he had were similar to the other questions that we've already asked. I think one of those, though, was related to, you know, the uses on the property, and I just wanted to address those. You know, he asked, you know, do they get cattle, sheep, goats, pig, horses, chickens, llamas, etc. As part of the R1 zone district, those are not permitted. I believe there is a, you know, a bee permit and maybe a chicken permit that could be obtained, which is pretty typical throughout the city. But other than that, it is not agricultural use. It would not be agricultural use, so no livestock, so to speak. I believe the other questions that he had related to the access to landscaping and becoming part of the HOA, we've addressed with y'all already.
All right, thank you. Next question from Charlene Baker. Will all of the right-of-way south of 148th have the city require Huron Farms to maintain that? It sounds like they're asking if they will continue to be responsible for the maintenance after this subdivision is potentially approved.
I'll take that. My understanding is that all the improvements for landscaping, irrigation, etc., on the south side of 148 would become the responsibility of Huron Farm. It would no longer be the responsibility of Quail Hill HOA. I believe the north side, which is currently maintained by the HOA, would remain their responsibility. But all the stuff on the direct frontage of the Huron Farm would be the Huron Farm's responsibility.
Right. Thank you. Next question is from Muriel Dunning. Since the public right-of-way will now be shown as part of the 2 properties, would they maintain? It almost sounds like a similar question or the same question.
Yeah, it does sound like a similar question. So yes, along the entire frontage of 140, the south side of 148, from the bend on the west side to Huron Street would be the responsibility of the Huron Farm subdivision. So both of those lots that we are creating would be responsible for that maintenance, the install and upkeep of that.
All right, thank you. Next is from Jonathan Nixon. If the entrance from 148th is approved, which I hope it doesn't happen, what would prevent guests of theirs parking on 148th when they visit?
Thank you, Mr. Nixon, for that question. I don't have an answer for that, so that is something we will need to explore There is sufficient space on site, but I don't know that there's anything that precludes parking in the right of way there. So that's something we'll need to look into.
Yeah, to add on to that, John, it's something, yeah, we can definitely look more into. If it was deemed necessary from a traffic safety perspective, the city could require the property owner to install no parking signs. But it'd have to be something that we'd look at and probably only require from a traffic safety perspective.
All right, thank you. Next is from Steve Platt. Though we are giving our comments at this meeting, at the end of the day, do we have any say whether or not we allow the driveway to come out onto Quail Hill Road, as a lot of us think this is a safety hazard, whether the trees are removed or not? Jacob, that might sound like more of a procedural question and approval authority question potentially, but.
Yes, so ultimately City Council has the approval authority for these applications. So it is City Council. So if you would like to continue to follow the project and speak to City Council about it, I'd encourage you to attend the public hearing. And then you can also follow along with this project later on. I'll put up a web address for our development status webpage, and we do try to update that on a regular basis with revised drawings, and we'll also have our contact information, so you can always contact me or John and to ask further questions.
All right, thank you. Next is from Mike Skabinski. What is the plan to improve or remove the partially built block wall on the west portion of the lot?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I believe it's somewhat of a repeat, but the intent for that block wall is that it will be removed along the frontage of lot 2. So a portion of those columns that are constructed already along 148 will be removed to the property line of the new proposed lot to the west. And then as you, at the corner where the bend is, we will also be required to remove about 25 feet of that existing wall to the front setback line or reduce it to 36 inches max. Per the code, we're not allowed to have a 6-foot wall in the front setback of a property. So the west half of that development, that wall will be removed, and then the remaining portion going to the east from the proposed property line to the east will be completed in kind, as it is partially completed right now with the masonry and the stone veneer.
All right, thank you. Next is from Charlene Baker. A new water tap would be needed for the new residents to maintain the south area. Again, our losses.
I don't know exactly how the irrigation is occurring right now. That's something we need to research a little bit more, but yes, you are correct. There will be a new water tap. There's an 8-inch water main that runs in the south, just south of 148th in the landscape area there. This subdivision will be required to have a new tap for the residents, as well as provide irrigation or take over that irrigation responsibility on that south side. So there's a little bit of work to be, or coordination to be figured out as to how that existing system is connected currently, and how to get that disconnected and reworked for the new layout.
All right, thanks. Next question is from Muriel Dunning. Without it being part of Quail Hill, what guarantee do we have they will take care of the property that is currently in disrepair?
Well, again, the frontage is public right-of-way, and that will be required to be maintained up to city standards. The wall will be completed, so some of the back area there will be screened, and then on the west property, or the lot 2, as we're proposing for the new house, that's all going to be front yard. And there are certain codes in place that are, require maintenance of the front yard and the right of way. So those are typically part of, I believe, the ODP document as well.
Next is from Charlene Baker. Ms. Baker, I don't understand the next question. It says, maybe it's a part of the previous question, of landscape of last 30 years, Huron Farms wins again. Can you clarify that in a separate line? And I'll go ahead and jump to your next question here. I really hope Huron Farms understands how much it will cost to maintain the south right-of-way as we struggle with 48 homes supporting the maintenance. Some food for thought.
I appreciate that. I guess we haven't got down to costs of maintaining that, but we are aware that we'd be responsible for maintaining that portion. And I guess I wouldn't say it's a loss necessarily to Huron Farm, to Quail Hill. I believe that right-of-way will be improved. Again, the landscaping that's being required at this time appears to be substantially more than what was originally provided out there. Now, I know, over the years some things have died and the like, but there's substantial landscaping or street trees and the like that are going to be required. I think it will create, a handsome corridor and help augment the entry there rather than degrade it. So I would, I believe once you guys are able to see some of the plans and the like, you will appreciate what's being proposed.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Baker clarified the previous statement. They inherit all of our work and landscaping. Next is a question from Muriel Dunning. Just to clarify once again, will the wall currently finished between Quail Hill and the second house, will it remain?
Yeah, I think this is similar to a previous question. A southern portion of that wall that's existing on the west side between the Quail Hill residence and this property will remain. Again, from the corner, or where that bend, where it kind of has a little L bend and starts heading east along 148th, that portion and 25 feet of the west portion is being shown there on the plan is going to need to be removed, because that is within the front yard setback of the residence, and the code does not permit a 6-foot wall within that area.
Okay. The next is a comment from Charlene Baker. All we have to do is look at the east side of Huron, across from Huron Farms, to understand what Westminster standards are for maintenance of rights of ways. Next question is from Mike Skabinski. I likely missed this earlier, so feel free to not repeat. Sounds like driveway crosses Quail Hill HOA property. Is that correct? If so, has Quail Hill HOA approved?
I'll just help Mike, since he might have missed that earlier. The proposed driveway does not cross Quail Hill property. The entire area along, or the entire right-of-way from the north property line of the Huron Farm subdivision to the north side of West 148th is actually city public right-of-way. It is not Huron Farm right-of-way. And I think, just to help clarify, while Quail Hill was required to develop that and landscape that at the time the subdivision was developed, the ownership is still part of the city's. However, the responsibility falls to the owners to maintain that. And so, as I mentioned, this south side of 148th will be the responsibility of Huron Farm. The driveway does not cross or impede any Quail Hill property. And again, we will revisit, ensure that any adverse effects related to traffic and visibility and the like associated with that drive are accounted for. And that's part of the reason we go through this process with the city, is to ensure that, things aren't being put in there just willy-nilly, but that all these things are vetted out during the process, so you have a good appropriate development, but also a safe development, and one that improves the neighborhood rather than causes adverse effects.
All right, thank you. Muriel Dunning asks, what type of fence will be replaced there? If you're removing that section of 6 feet fence.
As of right now, there is no fence proposed. We can have something up to 36 inches tall in that front right of way. And so whether there's a stone wall that's only 36 inches in kind with the 6-foot one that's existing, or if it's some columns with some wrought iron, or nothing at all, that has not been completely worked out yet. If there is something, again, it would tie in with the architecture of the house and that existing wall, since that is such a strong feature. And so that's not something that we'd want to necessarily deviate from, but keep continuity so that it is, it looks like it was planned, which it is being planned. So at this time, we don't have anything proposed, but if it were a wall or a fence, it would be reviewed against the codes and the look and feel and architectural style of the home and the surrounding area, so that it is fitting for the development.
All right, thank you. Next is a comment from Charlene Baker. The north side of the right-of-way has been infringed by about 6 feet by a property owner to the north. Will the city end this infringement? Ms. Baker, I think this would be something that we should refer to our transportation engineer and our city engineer for inspection or review to take a look at that encroachment. And so we'd be happy to refer this to those gentlemen. Next question is from Mike Skabinski. Can you put the site plan back on the screen? My comment would be that the city should then be responsible for the full entry lot if it owns it. Quail Hill has paid for maintaining for 25 plus years. Yes, and here's the site plan here.
John, I think I can address that. So in the city of Westminster, the city code requires either, if it's a common HOA, the common HOA would be responsible for landscaping and maintaining the landscaping in the adjacent right-of-way. And if there's not an HOA, it's the responsibility of the adjacent property owner to maintain the landscaping in the right-of-way. Very typically, and under our city standards, we require that landscaping to be shown on an official development plan. So the Quail Hill ODP that was created in the 90s for the Quail Hill subdivision, when they put in this street, the city under those landscaping regulations required that Quail Hill maintain the landscaping along that street. I live in the Torrey Peaks neighborhood, and my neighborhood is also responsible for maintaining and upkeeping landscaping within the right of way. And this is a very common condition throughout the city.
Thank you, Jacob. Next is from Muriel Dunning, and I can answer this one. Whose codes, Westminster or our HOA? So everything that Jacob has been mentioning regarding code would be this Westminster City Code or our residential design standards. Most newer neighborhoods, probably such as your own, has an HOA, and you have private covenants. In most cases, those private covenants go more beyond what city code requires. And so this city is just responsible for enforcing the city code, but would not be responsible for enforcing your private covenants. Next is from Charlene Baker. What about the rock wall on the east side of Huron Farms near Huron Street? Will that be reduced in size also? Is that shown on the site plan?
Yeah, I can pull it up as well. So yes, along the front portion of the lot, the city does not allow walls or fences over 6 feet in height along the front of the house. And so as this would be the new front of the house up here, in this portion here, there can be where I've kind of X'd out, there cannot be a wall or a fence over 36 inches in height. And so they would need to remove all the fencing or wall that's above that height in this location.
All right, thank you. Next is from Mike Skabinski. This is a follow-up to an earlier question. Wouldn't the addition of a new home / driveway that is not part of the current HOA, Quail Hill, change the situation since it's no longer 100% Quail Hill? Is this maybe a question about the landscape maintenance and responsibility?
I think so, John. Yeah, so it's you might have missed this earlier, Mr. Skabinski, but the city would require that the owner of these two lots take over the maintenance responsibility for the landscaping along the south portion of the right-of-way of West 148th Avenue.
Charlene Baker states that I'm talking about closer to the current home. I think this may be in regards to the previous question about the wall. Is there a wall along the existing residence somewhere around Huron Street that there might be a reference to? Ms. Baker says yes.
Yeah, just a moment here. There are some small kind of entry columns and the like there, and there is some fence, but the portion along 148th will remain. The stuff that's along here is really just some stone columns that flank the driveway. So there's no wall there, and there's no proposed wall along the Huron frontage or at that corner of 148th and Huron. There is a wood fence on a portion of that frontage of the existing residence along 148th, and then the stone wall. Does that answer your question, Ms. Baker?
Okay, and we'll wait on a response from Ms. Baker, and I'll go to the next question from Muriel Dunning. Can you explain why the split of the property is creating a property 2, I guess a lot 2 that is smaller than surrounding properties? There is sufficient space to split to maintain like-sized properties. Sounds like the suggestion is why not have the existing lot or lot 1 and lot 2 be roughly the same size versus lot 2 being smaller than lot 1?
I think that's really just a preference of maintaining some uses on lot one versus trying to evenly divide them. Again, they are meeting the minimum requirements for lot size for the R1 zone district. So we didn't feel like necessarily balancing them evenly was necessary, just because of the bulk of some of the uses on lot one. So I don't know that I have a great answer for that, other than, you know, the programming that we were looking at didn't necessitate trying to split them evenly.
John, I'd like to add on to that as well. So
Sure.
the city only has for this R1 comprehensive plan designation, the minimum lot size is 17,500 square feet. So they do by approximately 20,000 square feet exceed that minimum lot size that the city would require. So the city can't, the city standards do not require that they make it larger.
Okay. And clarification on the wall question from Charlene Baker. I think the area I'm talking about is their side yard after the split rail fence. It's where they originally started the wall.
Okay, and yeah, that portion of the wall would be completed, or that's what we're proposing at the moment. To complete that would be the west portion of lot one, would be completed to the point where we then transition into lot two frontage, and then we either don't have a wall or a fence, or we're limited to 36 inches.
All right, and Muriel Dunning comments that the smallest lots, I presume in Quail Hill, are 1 acre, and suggests to keep these lot sizes in relationship to the housing surrounding it. So she's suggesting that they should be larger to be to more or less match the Quail Hill lots.
Okay, we will take that into consideration. And yeah, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
All right, it's just before 7 p.m. And would any of the audience have any more questions or comments to add tonight? We'll give it another couple of minutes and then maybe move to closing comments from the applicant. There is another question from Brina Martinez. Will this be considered unincorporated Adams, the new lot?
No, this is the city of Westminster. So the entire property is within the city of Westminster. This first property adjacent to 148, the ones to the south, I think there's 4 more directly to the south. Those are unincorporated Adams County, but this one is within the city.
Right. If the audience has any final questions, please go ahead and enter them. Here's one from Jonathan Nixon. Since we have no say in where the driveway will be, I urge the city not to allow the entrance on the bend of 148th. And Charlene Baker supports that.
All right.
And Steve Platt agrees with Jonathan's comments too. So there's a overall concern about that driveway that continues with our residents here.
I'd just like to ask, I understand the concern, and would the folks on this call be amenable if we move the driveway further to the east, still maintaining access to 148, but moved it closer to the east property line so it's further away from that bend? It will not change our site triangle situation where we are needing to remove those two evergreens, but just curious to know if they would be supportive of that.
Okay, first comment response from Mike Skabinski is he's not supportive of it connecting to 148th at all. And Steve Platt agrees that we would like it moved to Huron Street. We're not supportive of the driveway on 148th. Ms. Baker agrees as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jacob, if I could chime in, I'm Jared Melius. I'm the landowner. I've kind of been lurking and listening, and I appreciate everybody's questions and concerns, actually quite a lot. And I want to be in conversation with the neighbors. So I just want to open up my driveway and my house anytime if anybody has questions that's asking questions. I'd be more than open to discussing options. One of the questions I would have is I was a little surprised that some in the neighborhood were kind of objecting to my taking over the right-of-way care, and I'm just curious if the HOA, or at least maybe those who are here, would prefer to continue to maintain the HOA. I don't even know if that's possible, but I'm just curious if that is something that would actually be desired by residents.
Charlene Baker entered a comment in response to your question, Mr. Melius. Not if you have a driveway there. So in other words, the driveway continues to be the main concern. They would not be interested in continuing to maintain maintenance of the landscaping if there's a driveway there. And Muriel Dunning stated that we would not maintain the south side, period. And Charlene Baker adds, I want to be a good neighbor, but this plan is not feasible. So I guess I would also make a statement that according to Mr. Melius, the door is open if you wanted to offer any more suggestions or comments. You can certainly send them through your project planner here, Jacob Kaza, but we can provide contact information for the applicants as well if it's desirable for parties to get together and discuss any of this further too during the development review process. Got another comment from Jonathan Nixon. No, that's not my desire, but my concern is that we've been looking at an unfinished wall for years, so I'm skeptical about what it will look like. Mike Skabinski states that I feel the city should maintain the rest. It's no longer Quail Hill subdivision from the entry west. And Muriel Dunning adds that no, we would not maintain the south side. And Charlene Baker adds, I want to be a good neighbor, but this plan's not feasible. Ooh, I think I already read that one. My apologies. I apologize. The screen jumps around a little bit. Okay, last one was Muriel Dunning, driveway on 148th, and lot size is the concern in summary there. All right, well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time and concerns. It looks like we've got one more question here, or a comment from Brina Martinez. I think you taking over the south side would be great with all of the landscape and the wall, how we would maintain both sides to look good together. Okay, so it sounds like a desire for the applicant to take over the side, the south side, as long as it looked good and it matched the other side, from Brina Martinez.
Yeah, I know it doesn't look good right now, and I'd like to extend my own concern and even apologies. I inherited it this way, and I've wanted to finish that wall. I've been quoted in the area of 6 figures to complete it. It's a big project, and I for our family, I'm a pastor in a small congregation, and I have a lot of kids. So for us to kind of work to get that wall finished is pretty daunting. This is a way that we can conceive of doing it, and I do want perhaps to communicate to the neighborhood as well that we have a joint interest in having a nice frontage on 148th. So part of our concern is the way it actually looks right now. You can turn the corner and look on the Huron frontage road and see, at least, I mean, it's not immaculate, but you can see how I keep the frontage of my current house right now, right there on the corner. That's what I would anticipate, if not more, maintaining that right of way if this proposal should be successful.
John, it doesn't look like we have any other questions or comments coming in. I'm going to go ahead and put up our contact information and some helpful links just for the end of the meeting. And I realized now that I actually did not type in your last name. I put in Sterling. My apologies to John.
Oh, no worries. It's the correct email address, so it'll get to the right place.
Yeah, so that's the consultant or the applicant's email address up there on the top. And then again, there's my name, my direct phone number, and my email address. As I stated at the beginning of the meeting, this has been broadcasted live on YouTube, and it is being recorded, and that recording will be put up on YouTube. If you're super curious, City has a lot of videos on our YouTube page, so definitely some interesting things to check out on there. And then also the Planning Division has a web page on the city's website called the Development Status web page, where we have updates on all of the various development projects throughout the city. So you can check out if you're curious about any other construction in the area, or just want to look around and see what other developments are being considered throughout the city. That's where you can get it. We also try to keep this updated in a timely manner with a new site plan once that we get that from the consultant's submittals, and then we will put up the hearing dates and times on that website as well. You can also find any hearing times on the city's events webpage, and then at the time, if this goes forward to a public hearing, for the public hearing, they would need to mail out to adjacent property owners, put signs up on the property, and as well as a newspaper notice, and then I mentioned earlier, website notice as well.
Thank you, Jacob. I'd just like to say a few words. Again, thank you all for attending and being concerned neighbors, looking out for your neighborhood. You know, this process exists for this very reason. We and the Meliuses want to, you know, put together a well thought out development that meets the criteria. The city criteria is safe, is good looking, and also meets their needs. And so we will take your comments and concerns, go back to the drawing board, go through these things and continue with our process. We've made one submittal, and so we will gather the input that you provided and see what changes we can or can't make, and try to address those in our next submittal to city staff, and then just proceed through the process with the additional reviews and public hearings. So again, I thank you all for your time and your well thought out questions and concerns.
Well, with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And again, if you want to reach out with any comments or questions, please contact us through those email addresses or the phone number. And thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.